Hi everyone, my name is Chloé with Messdaghi, and today we're going to talk about hacker rights. I first want to say thank you to ROOTCON for having me. I'm excited to be here. So let's dive into it. Let me share my screen. Hold on one second. All right, here we go. Hopefully you can all see my screen, but we're going to talk about hackers don't wear black hoodies, they wear capes. And yes, granted, I'm pretty sure many of us own a black hoodie, but let's be real, that doesn't identify that we are hackers ourselves. It's just very comfortable most of the time, and black goes with the color of my heart. Anyway, let's do this. I just want to say that this talk is completely dedicated to all the hackers who's ever been scared to disclose, to all the hackers who've been prosecuted for trying to do something good or doing their actual job, and to all the people who are in the fight to bring rights for hackers. If you don't know who I am, once again, my name is Chloé Messdaghi. I'm the VP of Strategy over at Point3 Security, but I'm also a hacker advocate and activist. I've been pushing for rights for hackers in the space, and I'm still continuing to do so to this day. I actually co-founded an organization called Hacking is Not a Crime, where it's a one-stop shop for you basically to know all the organizations that are working within the hacker community and pushing for rights. And also, what are some actions that you can do to participate in trying to bring about a change? I'm also the president and co-founder of WOSEC, which is Women of Security, and the founder of We Are Hackers, formerly known as Women Hackers. I'm also the podcaster for ITSP Magazine, The Uncommon Journey with Phil Wiley and Alyssa Miller. When I'm not doing that, I'm also the Hacker Book Club organizer, which meets every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. And we read a new book every month, and so that book itself is usually written by someone in the hacker community, and us as members of the Hacker Book Club are also hacker community members. So it's kind of a nice thing because we get to all come together as a hacker group to support one another. That is my URL. If there's anything you want to know about me, it's most likely on there, and also that is my Twitter and Instagram handle. Feel free to DM at any time. My DMs are open, but also feel free to follow. All right, let's get into the real stuff now. So first things first, we're going to cover the current landscape. And I know this is a scary subject for many of us, but we're going to do this together, I promise. Now, you probably remember the Equifax breach, but did you know that about 6 months before the breach made headlines, a hacker notified Equifax of the vulnerability ahead of time, but they didn't patch it, they didn't do anything about it. And this was something that showed in their records. And also it's one of those things that we see this often as hackers when we disclose something that basically it's either ignored or it's misinterpreted in the wrong way. Or the Capital One breach, where actually what happened was that according to the federal complaint, the breach took place in stages across March and April 2019. But Capital One only became aware of the problem on July 17th, when a security researcher tipped the company to a public GitHub page that was displaying something that looked an awful lot like Capital One private data. But what if no one reported the breach? And unfortunately, 60% of researchers don't report vulnerabilities. And this was something that Amit Elzari that you see in the corner there, she basically did research about possibilities of having safe harbor in the hacker community. Another statistic that came out was with HackerOne. They have a 2018 hacker report, which basically surveyed their hacker community and found that almost 1 out of 4 hackers do not report a vulnerability because the company in question didn't have a VDP. Those who did try to notify the company through other channels, such as email or social media, hello, DMs on Twitter, claimed that they were frequently ignored or misunderstood. And these are the reasons why we have a problem. Because the reason that we're not reporting things is because of the fear of being prosecuted. And that's the one takeaway of the current landscape. So like I said, why are hackers scared? The fear of prosecution, not knowing who to contact to disclose if they don't have a program, or even if they have a program, whether or not their policies are understandable to understand what's in scope or out of scope, can be really a burden sometimes. And I know that when looking for contact information, sometimes it takes hours, days, weeks, and then you get to a point where like, is it even worth it? And even if you're hired at a company and you have permission to do so, to hack into a system, you can still get prosecuted. So I want to dive into two case studies. The first one is with DJI, a famous drone manufacturer, as you're probably aware. But one thing to note is that a long time ago, they decided they wanted to start their own bug bounty program. So that means that they wanted to do it in-house. They didn't want to work with HackerOne, BugCrowd, or Synack or any of that. They wanted to do their own. But they didn't really fully research it, and so there were some issues with it. So two researchers, or I like to say hackers, because hackers are people that stay within scope and don't exploit, and that's what Sean and Kevin were doing. So Sean and Kevin, basically two hackers, came across the bug bounty program, and for the scope, it covered all security issues in firmware, application servers, including source code leak, and security workaround and privacy issue. Kevin then emailed DJI to reconfirm the scope, and it took them 2 weeks to respond. So that's already letting you know there's a communication issue, or someone's not managing this program properly, or they didn't do the research. The fact that it took 2 weeks for them just to say, yes, what you saw on our website is, yes, that is true. That is within scope. They couldn't even do that a faster time. But anyway, so he then proceeded to report a vulnerability. Remember this vulnerability, he stayed within scope, he didn't exploit. DJI turned around like, congratulations, here's $30,000 for what you found. Now, the only problem is that it came with a catch, which was if he signs a contract, it offered no protection for him. So basically he walked away from it because he wanted to protect himself more than whatever the amount of money that they were going to give him. So he basically walked away, but what happened was that DJI internally saw him as a threat. So they decided to give him a lawsuit tied to the CFAA, which is the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, claiming he went out of scope when in regards he actually stayed within scope. He then was like, okay, you want to do this with the hard way? Fine. So he posted every single internal conversation showing evidence of the entire paper trail that he had about what happened to him in DJI. And of course, DJI, it was a very bad PR thing, and they pulled out. But it was just one of those reminders that you can actually face this regardless if you're in scope and you're not exploiting. You still have to worry about companies coming after you saying that you broke the CFAA. Now let's go into another one. So this one is a physical security case, but it's something important to note. So in September 2019, the Iowa State asked the cybersecurity company called Coalfire to conduct a penetration test to see if its staff can gain access to sensitive data or equipment. Now, the two Coalfire employees found the door to the Dallas courthouse open, and when they closed the door to see if it would lock, the alarm went off. Following the protocol, the employees waited for the police to arrive and show them their paperwork. And initially they were told they were good to go. However, a local sheriff appeared on the scene and actually arrested them, and they had to spend a night in jail. The charges were later dropped this year, late in January. However, it's one of those examples that even if you're hired to do this type of work, you can still get prosecuted. And that is the one thing we need to understand, is that we are missing a good Samaritan law that could protect our peers from this type of prosecution. But also it's one of those things that it's a reminder that people still in the public don't know the difference between a hacker and an attacker. And for those that do not know the difference between a hacker and an attacker, a hacker is one, once again, that stays in scope and doesn't exploit. An attacker goes out of scope and exploits. But overall, community consensus is that language of what's in scope or out of scope can be very hard to understand, but also when disclosing, it's also a challenge too, especially with the potential indictments, especially. It does keep all parties up all at night because program managers, they're asking to be hacked, but not get hacked badly. And how to handle situations when hackers are reporting something is something that they can all work on, to be honest. But overall, organizations and government, they do believe that having some sort of way to disclose it is critical for their security and to protect consumers. And so it is needed to have, but we're still running into a wall. And I know this is a scary subject once again, but here are some puppies to lift your spirits. And there is a cat for cat lovers, because I know you guys exist. As myself, I own 2 Shivas, which are pups, so I'm very much a dog lover, as you can tell by this slide. All right, let's keep going. So why is the public scared of us? And this is the thing we need to understand with empathy. One thing first is that even though hackers are not malicious actors, they're still being seen as such and treated as such. And the reason for that is that it reduces the chances of like having an ability to report a vulnerability and to be taken seriously instead of seeing us as people that are up to mischief and no good. And the unfortunate thing is that the imagery around the term hacker is very much a dark hooded figure in their basement. As you can see in this image itself, this is what happens when you type in ethical hacker and criminal hacker. You don't really see any difference between the 2 sides, even though one has permission, the other one doesn't. And that's the thing we need to understand, is that the public sees this imagery and already assumes that we are a criminal because of these images that keep being portrayed in the media. But it's not just the imagery itself that's holding us back from society for understanding who we are as a hacker community, but also the language used in the media. And when I mean the media, I mean marketing and press. Using the term hacker as someone who is a criminal is the thing that needs to change. The thing is that they should be using the term attacker, cyber criminal, malicious actor, and so on, and using the term hacker for someone who's being the superhero every day. So how does this imagery and language impact us? So the one thing I want to cover here, as you guys already probably know, is I'm obsessed with the brain. If you've seen any of my talks prior to this, I always talk about human behavior and cognitive science, and the brain is one of those things that makes us understand how humans behave. But the thing is that this imagery and language, what it does is that it feeds this fear that's based on stereotypes and biases of what hackers are and who we are. And this is through this process called socially constructed beliefs. If you're wondering, what is a socially constructed belief? Well, socially constructed beliefs are basically anything that you learn directly or indirectly from your surroundings. This could be from teachers, parents, friends, family. This could be the news, it could be in movies, it could be in books, but basically something that tells you something that is safe and not something that isn't safe. And basically they're the beliefs that are fully ingrained in your mind and that you take actions on based on that. So now you know what socially constructed beliefs are. Let's dive into the brain. So first things first, what we have to cover is, how does fear work? So remember that socially constructed beliefs, well, that actually is stemmed in your temporal lobe. And within the temporal lobe itself, there is this part of your brain. It's a tissue that's the shape of an almond, not too big at all, to be honest, but it's a subconscious place in your brain called the amygdala. Now, you probably heard the amygdala before as the fight versus flight mechanism. But one thing you need to know about this survival mechanism itself is also programmed to sort who is like me, who is not like me. So people outside of your circle or your bubble or your world, those are people that you're going to be a little bit more cautious around, because trust is earned, and it has to be very, very much earned if it's outside of someone's bubble. Trust is so much easier to have with another person if they share something in common with you. And this could be the way that you look, your background, your culture, your religion, your gender, any of that. There is this sense of, we understand each other because you're not a stranger danger. However, anyone who isn't you or like you, or someone who's outside of your circle, your social circle, that person could be stranger danger. And so the best way how to talk about this is, I want you to imagine that when you were little, you're watching movies and you basically were told indirectly and directly that people with pink hair are very, very dangerous. These people are the ones that are having gangs, and they're the ones that are causing mischief. They're the ones that are breaking into stores. They're the ones that are kidnapping people. They're the ones that are always the bad guys in the movies. So pink hair people are seen as dangerous. You've probably also heard from a parent or a teacher that pink hair people are dangerous. So thus what happens is that when you're walking down the street and someone with pink hair is behind you, your amygdala is lit up saying, warning, warning, danger, stranger danger. There's a pink hair person behind you, act. So then that signal goes to the prefrontal cortex of your brain. And when it's in the prefrontal cortex of your brain itself, it is the time where you are the CEO of your brain. You can question, use logic to break down to see what actions are best to take. So even though the amygdala is completely subconscious, this part of your brain is completely consciously aware. So when that person with pink hair is behind you, the amygdala is like, warning, warning, stranger. That signal goes to the prefrontal cortex of your head, which is right in the front right here. And at that moment, what happens is that you are thinking the following actions. One, I collect my bag a little bit closer, just in case if they're trying to steal something from me. I can walk a little bit faster too, in case they're trying to mug me. I can cross the street so then they don't follow me, or I can walk into a store. So all of those examples are, I'm trying to escape from a situation. It's a fight versus flight situation. I'm in a stranger danger situation because I've been told and I socially constructed belief that pink hair people are dangerous. Now the thing is, I just want to state this for one thing. The only difference between you and that person with pink hair is just that they have pink hair. However, because you've been trained to believe that someone with pink hair is a dangerous individual, you strongly believe in it, and it's as if it's in your DNA. Now the thing is to note is that there is a way you can challenge these socially constructed beliefs, because sometimes they're not right. Sometimes they're they're not correct at all. So for example, say for example, you were on your YouTube and you're looking through videos and you found a video of someone with pink hair talking about how hard it is to be someone with pink hair. And that person with pink hair was talking about how everyone sees them as a criminal. Not just a criminal, but that they can't even get a job sometimes, that it's very hard to climb the ladder because they're only seen as this lower person, this person with pink hair, and it's not taken seriously. Or this person with pink hair, every time they go into an elevator, someone gets out immediately out of fear or locks their door when they see them near in their car. This pink hair person tells you in the YouTube video how hard it is for them. Now, at that moment, you might be taking a step back and being like, I wonder if I did anything wrong, if I've done anything wrong to this person with pink hair. I don't think I have a problem with people with pink hair, but I'm curious if I've done anything here. Now, the next time you're walking down the street and there's someone with pink hair behind you walking, your amygdala sends a signal once again because it's subconscious. Warning, warning, stranger danger, there's someone with pink hair behind you. Your brain goes through the same thing, which is, all right, these are the following actions that I can take to get away from the person with pink hair, because my socially constructed belief is that person with pink hair is a dangerous individual. So I can either clutch my bag and walk faster, or I could cross the street, or I can go into a store. So then this person can't be near me and I can get away just in case this person is a criminal. But then also something new pops in your head. You remember that video, that YouTube video of that person with the pink hair talking about how hard it is to be someone with pink hair, and that everyone sees you as a criminal, and that it hurts you so deeply that every time the person with pink hair went into an elevator, they left immediately, they locked their car doors, and how much that impacted them when they saw someone clutch their bag across the street or go into a store to get away from them. And at that moment, you're making a conscious decision to question your socially constructed beliefs and to take a different action, an action you haven't really taken before, because there's new knowledge here. There's this new sense of awareness that maybe you're part of the problem. So at that moment, you decide to send a signal back to the amygdala to calm down, to take a chance, because that video really touched you. What this whole thing I'm trying to showcase here is that we all have the ability to question our socially constructed beliefs, or the beliefs that we have that the world works. But the only way that we can do so, we have to get outside our bubble. We have to get uncomfortable with the uncomfortableness. We have to be okay to question ourselves and our narratives and our beliefs. And always ask the question, am I being a good citizen right now? How can I be a better person in this world? This is the point where I should probably turn around and say, now, that's how people also see other groups of people. And for the hacker community, that's what people see us as, the public sees us as criminals. So when we're wearing that black hoodie, or we're coding, or we are out there and we tell someone we're a hacker, they might take a step back, their mouth might drop, their eyes might get bigger, or they'll try to find a way to escape the conversation because it's so uncomfortable for them to be near you, because they have a socially constructed belief because of the movies, the things they read in the news, from everything that they've been told, that hackers are bad people. They are criminals. And until we can challenge that belief and work with that belief and try to get the public to see a different perspective, we will never have any change. Because this fear, this socially constructed beliefs, this mindset set by society, by the people and the media of the public of who is a hacker and what is a hacker, and seen us in a devious light, is keeping us not safe. And is preventing hackers what we do best, which is protecting the people that we love and trying to be of a service to this world to protect people. Because at this time, more companies are becoming more open to receiving information about vulnerabilities. However, still 94% of the Forbes 2000 global list doesn't have a VDP program. And this is something we may come to regret at this time, because companies are afraid of hackers and they don't want to create vulnerability disclosure programs or policies, because there's a lack of a bilateral trust amongst hackers and organizations / government. It's one of the reasons why, to this day, 60% don't have they don't report vulnerabilities, the hackers that is, and why hackers are scared of outdated lawsuits to the CFA and DMCA. But this is also the reason why companies don't have a vulnerability disclosure policy, because they are afraid of us, because of the narrative, the socially constructed beliefs that they have. Also, from interviewing attackers, they themselves, the reason why they switched from being a hacker to an attacker was because of the pay, but also because they were seen exactly the same regardless if they stayed within scope or outside the scope. And this is also true to the other way. The reason why attackers switched to becoming hackers was because of the insomnia of being arrested and just wanting to be in a better light in the end. So we have to dive into the worldwide legislation. Like I mentioned a little bit earlier before, is that the fear that society has of us and the socially constructed beliefs that they have of the hacker community has prevented us from having rights. And we have legislation that is very much out of date, that was created out of fear without any representation of the hacker community. And this is why it hurts us the most. Whenever we have legislation that is passed and all parties that would be impacted by it are not represented at the table, people get hurt and people don't have a voice, and we don't have equity either. So it's so important is to have proper representation when it comes to legislation. Now, all around the world, we have anti-hacking laws, anti-circumvention laws, which are also copyright laws, and also acceptable use policy all around the world. And I know this looks US-centric, to be honest, but the thing is that the US set the standard of legislation that the rest of the world followed when it came to hackers. So let's first dive into the Computer Fraud Abuse Act. So CFAA is a United States cybersecurity bill that was enacted in 1984 as an amendment to an existing computer fraud law, which had been included in the Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984. The law prohibits accessing a computer without authorization or in excess of authorization, also to be used when a researcher goes out of scope. This is the very act used to prosecute hacking. Random fact, did you know Ronald Reagan, he watched this movie called War Games, and I'm probably you've seen it too. But basically, Ronald Reagan, when he watched it, he completely freaked out about hackers and the capabilities that they had. And I was like, we have to do something about these hackers, these dangerous kids that don't know anything better. And then that's how the CFA was created. It was because he watched the movie and it inspired him to create some legislation that is called the Computer Fraud Abuse Act today. I love the movie War Games, but dang, if only they knew that that was going to end up happening, I'm pretty sure they would have thought twice. Now, anti-circumvention laws, also known as copyright laws, the one thing to keep in mind is that the DMCA in the US, there hasn't been any cases that I am aware of hackers being prosecuted under. But the one thing to note about is that when it comes to the Computer Fraud Abuse Act, the one thing to note about it is that that is the law that is used against hackers. Whenever a hacker goes out of scope, or even if they stay within scope, it's the act used to prosecute all hacking. Now, the DMCA is a 1998 US copyright law that implements two 1996 treaties, the World Intellectual Property Organization, basically seeing right to repair, seeing reverse engineering as a breach to some companies. Now, when we come to, acceptable use policy, who here in the room has ever read the terms and conditions for an update or a product? Yeah, I thought so. I tried doing it once with the Apple product and I got really bored. Also, it was like as if one attorney was talking to another attorney. And I should just tell you right now, I am not an attorney. Just not to let you know ahead of time. But basically, the thing is that it's too much verbiage and it makes it really hard to understand, even if you are an English speaker. Even if you're learning English, this could be a huge problem too, because it's very hard to understand. And so this can lead to some serious miscommunication issues for hackers that don't really speak English. But overall, what I want to take away from this slide is that clearly the laws are old and out of date. And honestly, they were created out of fear once again. There was no empathy ever at any point of this to take the time to understand what is actually needed at this time and why laws should only prosecute malicious actors and not good hackers. So in general, the laws prevent good hacking in the same way that they prevent attackers, and we really need good hacking. And I want to dive into the CFA a little bit more because I really hate this, and I think you're going to hate it too. If you are not aware of it, you need to be aware of it. So the Computer Fraud Abuse Act, once again, was passed in 1984, has grown wildly outdated in that it offers prosecutors to discretion to threaten huge potential fines and jail sentences for relatively underserving violations of the computer policy. First, the CFA as written punishes exceeding authorized access to a protected computer, a phrase vague enough to inspire some very broad interpretations. Another flaw in the CFA is the redundant provisions that enable a person to be punished multiple times for the same crime. These charges can be stacked on top of another, resulting in a threat of a higher cumulative fines and jail time for the exact same violation, which we'll dive into that in the next slide about Aaron Swartz. This allows prosecutors to bully defendants into accepting a deal in order to avoid facing a multitude of charges from a single solitary act. It also plays a significant role in sentencing. The ambiguity of the provision meant to toughen sentencing for repeat offenders of the CFA may in fact make it possible for defendants to be sentenced based on what should be prior convictions, but were nothing more than multiple convictions for the same crime. Most importantly to note, the CFA also gives companies the right to sue. Hackers have more to fear from companies and states right now than the Justice Department. Just remember that. It is not the DOJ that's coming after you if you're an ethical hacker and you're staying within scope. It's the local governments and companies. I want you to understand that because that is important for you to know. But the thing about CFA is that there are numerous of cases of CFA prosecuting really good people. And this is one of those cases. So Aaron Swartz, basically in 2011, Carmen Ortiz's was the U.S. Attorney's Office charged Swartz with hacking into the MIT computer network to download millions of scholarly articles from JSTOR. It was supposed to be an act of civil disobedience meant to protest the restricted access to taxpayer research. But for this, the U.S. Attorney brought charges that carried a maximum penalty of 35 years in prison. I want to pause there. In the U.S., the minimum of serving for first-degree murder is 25 years in prison. Aaron Swartz was looking at 35 years in prison for one act. He never hurt anyone. He never hurt anyone. I want you to understand that. But yet that was what he was facing. Because the way that the CFA is written is that you can stack upon stack of years. And that's something you need to understand. Because of that, he was facing that 35 years in prison and $1 million in fines because of one act and how the CFA is written. Overall, when looking at Aaron's situation, it must have been so hard for him. He was dealing with a 17-month legal battle with no date set, no idea of when it was going to end anytime soon. I cannot imagine how he must have felt, but I can definitely understand that he felt hopeless. And because of that feeling, perhaps that was the reason why he took his own life in his apartment. On January 11, 2013, he was found hung. Following his death, federal prosecutors went on to drop the charges, but his family does believe that it was because of the government's prosecution. It was the reason why he decided to take his own life. Because of Aaron's horrible story, this led to legislators coming together to create something that would be amendments to the CFA. And this is called Aaron's Law. This was written in 2013. However, it didn't pass, but it's still important to note of it. Because it didn't pass of the big corporations that have lobbyists. They don't want CFA to go away. They need it to be vague so then they can continue to prosecute. But Aaron's Law, what it was going to do was remove the phrase exceeds authorized access and replace it with access without authorization, which is defined as to obtain information on a computer that the accessor lacks authorization to obtain by knowingly circumventing technological or physical measures designed to prevent unauthorized individuals from obtaining that information. Another one you need to know is about the DMCA. Just overall, this is very old. It's from 1998. Like I said, there was no cases, to my knowledge, of the DMCA being used against hackers, but it does produce a chilling effect, so it's important for us to know about it. But basically, what it does is that no person shall circumvent a technological measure that effectively controls access to a work protected under this title. It does contain provisions for security research, but in most cases does not allow them to break down defenses put up by the manufacturer without prior permission, such as those wrapped around firmware. Basically, the DMCA was kind of about trying to keep a tight control on how consumers use their copyrighted works, basically preventing them in some cases from making copies of the purchased products for their own use or from jailbreaking smartphones or other devices to use them in ways that manufacturers disliked. But with improvements to legislation, we can change where we stand right at this moment. But like I said, to be able to do that, we have to change the public perception of who we are as hackers and to understand that their socially constructed beliefs of what is a hacker, who is a hacker, is not correct. Because that is the one thing to bring about public change. You need public awareness and a public to push for it. So how are we going to influence the public cycle, or why we need to influence the public cycle, or how do we do this? Well, in order to have rights for hackers, we need to get the public on board. In order to do so, we need to dive into 3 categories. We need the press to push for the public to become aware. In other words, we need to change the language and imagery of a hacker and start using the correct terms, such as cyber criminal for those who commit unethical hacking. We'll really separate the 2 groups because we're very different. we're not really in the same group. We're two very different groups. In order to help the press, organizations need to be on board with bilateral trust and with having a vulnerability disclosure programs. By showing they support hackers, the public changes their view in general. Now, lastly, to have organizations and public opinion to push and motivate Capitol Hill to get on board and update the current legislation that will protect ethical hackers. Overall, we need all three of these to support hacker rights for it to become a reality. So how do we get there? Well, these are the 5 needs that we need to do. And overall, we need to push for awareness. And how we get there, I'm going to need you. I'm going to need your help to do that. First things first, there is a petition that is written. I wrote this at the end of February, but basically it's broken down by this entire conversation. So it's broken down by organizations, by legislators, by hackers, and also for the media on what are the next steps that they can do and to take responsibility for. Anyone can sign this petition who believes that we deserve rights. And I ask for you to sign and share it. That is the link right there. Now, the other thing that you can do is just go to hackingisnotacrime.org. Once again, hackingisnotacrime.org. You can find the petition and all the next steps of what to do for pushing for hacker rights, but also how to get involved. This is a one-stop shop for everyone in the hacker community and outside the hacker community to know what are the organizations that are supporting the hacker community in a good way when it comes to legislation and to produce better recognition for hackers themselves and to change the representation of hackers in the media. If you want to get involved, to volunteer or advocate, just please go to hackingisnotacrime.org. There's a form you can fill out. You just have to agree to the tenets. The other step that we need to do is talk to the press. That means we need to let them know they have it wrong. So if you ever see the press's article saying the term hacker instead of criminal, correct them. Send them a very polite and understanding not text message, a DM or a response to their article saying, hi, I came across your article and I really like what you wrote. There's one thing I want to let you know is that the term is actually not hacker, it's criminal or attacker. And the reason for that is that hackers are actually people that stay within scope and don't exploit. We're the ones that are trying to protect you from the bad guys. Now, another way how you can let the public know is also talking to friends, families, and colleagues and letting them know that there's a difference between the hacker and also an attacker. And a good way how to do that is let them know, think of a hacker as a locksmith and an attacker as a burglar. This tends to make it easier for them to understand. But it's not just the language being used, we also need to make sure that they use the correct images. So if you see them doing an article of a dark hooded figure, please correct them on that. Let them know that's not really what we look like at all. Oh, and if you're ever talking to the press, please don't wear a hacker, don't wear a hoodie because we're trying to change that stereotype, and please definitely don't wear a ski mask. I mean, who wants to wear a ski mask? Anyway, third step, how to get involved is to push for organizations to partner and campaign with hackingisnotacrime.org. And the reason for that is that the more companies we have on board to join us or organizations that want to join and bring rights and bring a voice to this hacker community, the more stronger that we stand when it comes to trying to change legislation. Because legislators listen to companies, but they also listen to people, and people will listen to companies and legislators. So there is, like I said, there's a public cycle which has to do with legislation, the media, and also organizations. They all three play a role to bring about a better awareness. Also, if you work for an organization that doesn't have a vulnerability disclosure program, please check out disclose.io. It's a really great organization that's trying to push for other companies to get on board. There's a really easy template that you can use. Also, anything you want to know about how to have a VDP program or set up a disclosure, it's all there, and it's a great resource for you to have. The fourth step is to contact your local representatives to update current legislation. They need to hear stories from you. They need to hear your story. They need to understand that you are so deeply impacted by the current laws and ask for them to take a stand with us, because this goes across party lines. Believe it or not, this is not a Democratic or Republican issue. This goes across all lines. This is just a human right issue. Now, the other thing to note about is that there is the Van Buren versus US case that's coming up. Be on top of that. It is going to be voted on, or not voted, but it's going to be represented in the Supreme Court on November 30th. So please keep an eye on that, because it's really important for us to be aware of. Now, you can also contact your legislators about it as well. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about this case. So basically what happened was that a former Georgia police officer was wrongly convicted under the notoriously vague CFAA, so remember the Computer Fraud Abuse Act. And basically what happened in this case is that Nathan Van Buren was accused of taking money in exchange for looking up a license plate in a law enforcement database. He was convicted of violating CFAA because he allegedly used that database for an improper purpose, even though it was a database that he was allowed to access for work purposes. Under this expansive interpretation of CFAA, it would be a federal crime, and this is very important to understand, at any time a person violates a website terms of services. If violating the terms of services is a crime, private companies now get to decide who goes to prison and for what, putting us all at risk for everyday online behavior. By following this case, look at the briefs that have been submitted to it. One of them is from Votes, and it's one that you need to read because it will make you angry. And it's okay to be angry, because take that anger and take action by letting your legislators know they are completely wrong about this. Disclose.io did release a letter in response to Vote's brief submission, and I have to admit I applaud them for that. It is scary to think that they believe that security research is a criminal activity when we need disclosure more than ever before, especially with the upcoming election. The fifth step to get involved is to support organizations. I keep dropping Disclose.io, but there's so many other ones, like I'm the Cavalry, also CERT Coordination Center, known as CERT CC, EFF, CTI League. Support them. If you're in the US, also take a look at CISA. They're trying to do whatever they can to try to support us as a hacker community. So it's really important is to get involved, volunteer, ask how you can help and support them. Because as a community ourselves, it's up to us to step up and help and support one another. And so that is the one thing why hackingisnotacrime.org is around, is because we wanted everyone to know about these organizations and to know that they can support the hacker rights cause or movement by volunteering their time. So the main takeaways over this entire talk is that overall we need to push for awareness for hackers to be able to have rights, because right now we don't have rights. And I probably should have said that at the very beginning, but I think you figured it out, but we don't have rights, unfortunately. But these are the 5 needs to get there, the main takeaways from everything. You now know everything, and I may need your advice and assistance, of course. So if you want to get involved, once again, check out hackingisnotacrime.org. But most importantly, I just want to remind you that change really does start with you and me. We cannot give up at this time. We must continue to fight for our rights, because that is what we need to do. Because we know people that have been impacted, and ourselves have been impacted because of the public's perception of who we are. And I think it's time for the public to know who we really are, and that we are that everyday hero. We are the people behind the screen that are protecting them from their information getting out there. We are the ones that prevent breaches. We're the ones that report bugs so then companies can fix it. We are the ones that are doing whatever we can to protect people. And I don't think society knows about that. So until we can be more out there about that and to change the media's perception of who we are, get legislators to understand us and take the time to understand us and take the time to listen, because that is their job. is to hear stories and to take action when necessary. These are things that we can do at this very moment to change where we are today. I want to just say thank you guys so much for existing. Thank you, ROOTCON, for having me. I hope next year I can be there in person if COVID-19 disappears. But thank you guys so much for existing. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer it all. Also, feel free once again to follow me or reach out. My DMs are open on Instagram and Twitter. Thank you guys so much once again. Thank you guys for existing, and I'm going to do whatever I can to help out the hacker community, and I hope you will join with me. So thank you all, and have a wonderful day, and stay safe and wear a mask.